Welcome to the Brohoyo podcast, the podcast about gacha in general and Hoyoverse games in specific. I'm your host, Steven, and this is my co host, David.
Hey everyone.
And this week we're going to go over the events of the Honkai Star Rail 2.2 story patch. So if you haven't completed it at this time, this is your spoiler warning. We aren't going to be avoiding anything or trying to cover anything up. This is going to be full spoilers. So I guess just to kick us off, Dave, how about you jump in with our first part of the summary of the 2.2 story?
Yeah, so welcome everybody this week. So yeah, diving right in to 2.2, and we'll just give 5 more seconds here for our spoilers, folks. So they're coming in 3, 2, 1. We start off the event mission with an introduction to Boot Hill. So he gets his first on-camera appearance, and he's on the Astral Express interacting with Don Hung while the rest of the crew is, of course, on Penacony. So we're introduced to him and his discussion with Don Hung, and he appears to be on the hunt for Acheron because she is potentially what we as the player maybe know what she is to the path of Nihility being the Emanator, but there's suspicion from his perspective, right? He doesn't necessarily know, but that she's involved with the Nihility somehow and is posing as a Galactic Ranger, or a Galaxy Ranger, excuse me, which is the group he is associating with or claiming to associate from. And we're going to get into character breakdowns and such in a little bit in terms of our impression of some of these new characters we've been introduced to. But just to get through the plot very quickly, we then move into a reoccurring storytelling narrative that they introduced in the last patch with the split POV. So we then jump from this point of view and put a pause, a little bow in that one, or a pin in that one, and then we jump over to Robin's point of view, where we get Robin walking around and interacting with citizens essentially of Penacony in the aftermath of the players' fight with Aventurine, as well as the huge action of Acheron in that boss fight and tearing open the sky essentially with her giant sword slashing, which was a pretty awesome cutscene if we all remember that one. But as we come to find out, this Robin actually isn't Robin. It's actually Sparkle pretending to be Robin, right? Because in our heads, Robin is, to the player's knowledge, is last dead from what we know. And so this is Robin again, or excuse me, Sparkle posing as Robin and going around handing out some mysterious gifts of an unknown nature for the giant Charmony festival that is upcoming. From there, we jump point of views again, which I know we all had our opinions on from that 2.1 story breakdown. But then we jump point of views over to the Trailblazer and what they're doing in the story. So they are essentially, we're with Firefly, you, the player, the Traveler, or excuse me, not the Traveler, and there's Genshin, Trailblazer, excuse me. You learn about this Dream Flux Reef in this primordial memory zone, and I don't want to get lost in the minutia of it, but essentially this is an area that is rediscovered because of the tearing open of the rift between the memory zones. And so Firefly, she explains a little bit more about this and takes us on tour, and we're seeing various characters, and then we're ultimately introduced to Gallagher, or reintroduced rather to Gallagher, who is also here. And Steve, just going to jump into what happens next.
Yeah, so what happens next is a massive lore dump. It's also important to note that the boss called Death, or what was called Death in the previous patches, you find out is not Death. It's, I think, Deceit or something. Some other D word. But basically, all it does is it moves people from the Penacony dream to the deeper area of the dream where a lot of other characters actually are. Regardless, you meet Gallagher. You find out Gallagher is a history fictionologist who is someone who studies fake history. That's just a thing yeah. Turns out that there is a traitor in the family that is trying to exploit the Charmony Festival and overthrow Penacony. You find out about the three nameless who had come to Penacony earlier in its history near its founding and helped found Penacony. One of which was the Watchmaker, who was known as Mikhail, who bequeaths an inheritance to the crew, which is an empty dream bubble, which is weird because normally dream bubbles can't be empty. From there, the story jumps tracks again and goes back to Don Hung and Boot Hill. The two of them are trying to get in contact with the crew of the Astral Express who are still in the dream. They go to the hotel. They're not able to get access to the dream, so instead they end up going to the lobby. There's some story world building, but the long and the short of it is that Boot Hill is in contact with Black Swan, and Black Swan gets in contact with Boot Hill, and this is how Black Swan, Acheron, Don Hung, and Boot Hill all end up together as a party on the Astral Express for the story to move forward. But jumping back, Dave?
Yeah, and then we jump point of views again. So they put a pin on the Astral Express and some of the suspense they're building there, and then we jump to Robin's point of view. And I did appreciate. I thought this was funny in the Fates Atlas in Star Rail itself, where you can go to view a summary of the story. When they split it into the paths, you have Robin's path, you have Boot Hill's path, you have Robin question mark's path, and then you have the Trailblazers path. And that Robin question mark one was the Robin, but it was really Sparkle. And then again, you have this top one that is the real Robin. So this is how we knew, okay, this is the real Robin that we're back with. So we jump to real Robin, and through discussions and plot points that Gallagher has exposed to the team, we have Welt, Sunday, and Robin ultimately going to negotiate with the Dream Master to work all this out, and Welt being the neutral third party to play peacemaker, play mediator in reaching a peaceful conclusion so that the Charmony Festival can ultimately go off without a hitch. And from this instance, Himiko kind of has a line in there when they all kind of split off, and she's talking to the Trailblazer, I think, just mentioning that something seems off with Sunday. Something's not feeling right with him. Just call it intuition or whatever it is. But that's so we're left with that as the player. Like, okay, something to keep an eye on for foreshadowing, maybe, who knows, right? And then we jump back into kind of just one congruent timeline, and we get from the point of view of the Trailblazer and Himiko and March 7th, we get to go to these Soul Glad festivity auditions, which is basically the show before the Charmony Festival. It's this huge show to try and win this contest that'll have you be special guests to the Grand Hall for the actual Charmony Festival type thing. It's essentially it's a mini game festivity. It's a reason to put puzzles and things at us as players, which we'll discuss our thoughts on some of those a little bit later on. And you ultimately win the audition, right? You get the grand prize. You run in. I was going to say Arlecchino, but that is not correct.
No.
Because that is Genshin Impact. But a different red fiery character who's slipping me right now.
Are you thinking of not Adventurine? It's Night Guy, the Knight of Beauty.
Yes, the Knight of Beauty. Yes, so I want to get his real name.
It's
But yeah, the Knight of Argenti. That's
Argenti.
what it was. I knew it was an A, and I was sorry. Oh, it never ends, the conflation of the worlds. But that is the big stuff there, and then I guess from there we get a lot of revelations with Sunday and the Dream Master and Welt. Steve, what do we jump to after the game show segment?
After the game show segment, you get to the finale, you get to the Charmony Festival, and you run into Sunday, and you find out that Sunday and the Dream Master have teamed up with the on Inna, who is not dead but just sleeping in Harmony. It's gotten absorbed into Harmony, and Inna is the Aeon of Order. Order has been subsumed by Harmony, and basically Sunday does a here are 3 questions, answer how you will, but ooh, moral choice. Let's see if we can get along. We're not so different, you and I, sort of quiz. And you find out that he has also captured Robin and Welt. That they are now out of the story. They are captured. Everything comes to a crescendo, and you end up fighting Sunday, who basically is trying to use the Charmony Festival to, for lack of a better term, cast a spell that would cause everyone on Pinacone to fall into a deep dream and basically become subservient to Inna, the Aeon of Order, and he instead does a kaiju transformation to become a giant conductor called the Harmonic Strings Harmonious Choir, the Great Septimus is his full title. And you have a boss fight with him, which, assuming that play the game and are of high enough level, you're able to beat him, which then
Yeah.
leads into.
So then we get the credits, right? So
Yep.
we beat the boss, we get the credits to roll, which I thought was funny. And then you get your Marvel Avengers after the credits scenes, and Black Swan essentially is talking to you through dreams because you were incapacitated, you were passed out from just all this exertion event, energy, I guess, or whatever have you. And basically we're coming to find out that that ending wasn't really the ending. And Black Swan asks you, the character, to think about the events that have transpired that we have experienced as players. We ultimately find that there is a flaw. There is something that happened within the story as it's been told that couldn't actually happen. And again, I'm sure those that haven't played through yet or aren't playing through, this doesn't make a lot of sense, and I don't want to get lost in the minutia of it all. But essentially, yeah, there's something that occurred that, due to game logic, couldn't have actually occurred, and it is at this moment that we realize everything that we've experienced has been a dream. We've been Inception or Matrix start vibes ourselves a little bit, and because Black Swan is able to assist us in realizing this, it wakes us up from quote unquote the Matrix, and we realize we haven't actually beaten Sunday yet, and we need to actually beat him and wake people up and get the people to realize that they also want to wake up as well, so we can ultimately overcome the path of order. Because essentially, through the path of order, everybody loses their free will. It's quite literally like the Matrix, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's everybody lives that happy life, and but they don't have free will, they don't have independent thought, nothing like that, right? And so, from waking up from the quote unquote dream, you slowly get reintroduced back to all your party members, your team members, and then you have the last real fight with Sunday. Again, similar mechanics as the first fight with a few extra twists in
Yep.
that we're introduced to the Path of Harmony Trailblazer. So previously the Trailblazer, we've had two paths that we can choose between for the character. We've had the physical damage one that we're all used to. We've had the fire damage one that we're used to, and now we have a light damaging one that is on the Path of Harmony. And you're forced to construct a party that includes the Harmony Trailblazer. You fight Sunday again, and with the help of Robin being the big boss mechanic, similar to Don Hung in previous and Byro Don Hung in previous fights, or going all the way back to the Kokolia fight, the big fist punch there mechanic. She is the mechanic for this fight. You ultimately win, are
I'm sorry, I
victorious.
disagree with that one real quick. You don't use Robin. You use the Astral Express. You hit him with a train.
Oh, okay. Let's repeat. Yes. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yes, the power of love and sunshines in the Astral Express being the big thing, sure. But her music's playing in the background, so I associate it with her.
Fair, but it's a
Yes.
train. We hit him with a
She's
train.
singing. She's singing, and therefore everybody
Yeah,
loves
it's
it.
the song that does something, not the
The song that
thousands of
does it, not
tons
the
of steel.
train
Yeah.
barreling through the boss. But we ultimately come out victorious, and then we get the second credits, the real credits this time, and are setting up for the next chapter. And we get a cutscene also with Jade on the phone with Aventurine, and the IPC going to be playing a bigger role in the next story chapter as it relates to Penacony. And yeah, so I think that's enough of a Cliff Notes version to sum up some things.
Mhm.
We can go back now, Steve. I want to get into your thoughts as you were playing through the story. Anything that you're like, man, that's definitely something I'm going to talk or ask Dave about, or something I want to get feedback from the audience on. I'll share one point thing that jumped
Mhm.
out for me really quickly, and then I'll toss over to you for some thoughts, and then
Mhm.
we'll have some back and forth. But the one thing I'll talk about here, and I joked about it there, was the forced harmony trailblazer in your team combination. So as I was playing through this, I literally there was a big plot point that happened, and I know we'll discuss that, so I'm just going to leave that alone for the moment. There's a big plot point that happened. I messaged you about that plot point, and then we jump into this fight where they force you to use the Harmony Trailblazer, and I do not really have a team comp that had space for her to work. And so the first attempt I did, and this one was my fault on the first attempt that ended up failing. Just replaced my sustain on my dot team. So my Fushuan went out, and I put in Harmony Trailblazer, and I didn't have any healing, and it's a very long fight, and so I lost. And that's my fault because I didn't read her abilities to see that she didn't have healing or sustain. That's on me. Fine. It took me, I think, 4 attempts to ultimately beat the boss the second time. And even when I did finally beat it, the fight took way longer than it would have if I could have just used the team that I wanted to use. And my team that ended up beating it was my Jingliu team, minus I ended up having to pull out Pela because I had to have the sustain, you had to have Brony as an enable, and then obviously I have to have somebody that does damage. The issue with this team is the weakness of the final boss is not ice. And I never got the break. I never got to break him until the third phase when he has a weakness to everything for some reason, but I'm glad that he did. And the mechanic of the fight is if you break down his toughness bar, your team gets a shield that absorbs damage from him. So I never got that. So it was a very long fight. And so I didn't like that they force you to use a team comp, especially when it's something that I don't have a place for in my team. I think my words to you that night were literally, this is almost ruining how good these last like moments and these plot twists and the culmination climax of the story has been. Like, it was, to me, it was a very good climax, very good twists and turns and some revelations, but this almost ruined it for me. It didn't, but almost. So I wanted first your initial reaction to that, and then things that stood out to you.
So I'm going to be honest. I did not have those same issues that you had. Part of that was, and I don't want to be mean about this, but part of it was I read Harmony Trailblazer's kit and found out what it was about. And you can at least to me, it seems like they very clearly built the fight around Harmony Trailblazer's new super break mechanic. We'll get into that when we start talking about characters. But for the purposes of this discussion, that fight was really built around you having an imaginary character who is built around break. Now, to be fair, I have an easier time of it. I have Ruan Mei, the Harmony Trailblazer, or with Illusionary Trailblazer, whichever one you want to call them. Those two are break effect harmony characters. Or, yeah, break effect harmony
You
characters.
like turbo breaking.
Yeah, so I'm turbo breaking.
Bars.
All I did was slot in Welt and then add a sustain, and that was my team. So it was basically, for me, it was Welt, Harmony Trailblazer.
I probably could have added Welt now that I'm thinking about it, especially
Yeah.
since I think he's E2. But yeah, anyway.
Ruan Mei, and then I think I used Fushuan as my sustain.
Okay.
So I went into that fight basically already built for that mechanic. So I did not experience the troubles you had. I think, unfortunately, moving forward, every time we get to a final planet boss fight, since we're probably going to have a new version of Trailblazer, the idea is going to be that the Trailblazer is required for that fight. So I think, unfortunately, in the future, this isn't going anywhere, just because we had the same issue in both in the Xiangjiao, or however you pronounce the Space China, and on Urillo. Both of those required Trailblazer for the final fight. So I think it's just something that unfortunately is going to be carried over going forward. But I can understand the frustration with it. And if you're not expecting it and you're trying to slot the character into a team, I can see the difficulty there. I would say an issue separate from that I had with the story was it felt very choppy. And not just because you're jumping between characters in the first half of it. Throughout the story, it felt like you would be on a track and then all of a sudden it would just switch. Like there was just a switch, and all of a sudden you're talking about something else or you're dealing with something else, and it didn't feel like it came together or went together very well in some parts. I think the big one is the part that really annoyed me the most was when the Trailblazer section that was in between Sparkle's story, where she's running around giving gifts, and then Don Hung and Boot Hill. So when they're in the deep dream,
Yep. Okay.
it felt like it's a lot of and then instead of because. I think the South Park creators did a little speech about how you do writing, and it should be blank because what came before, blank because what came before, blank because what came before. Like everything should flow into each other.
You don't really think of South Park as being that,
Yeah, yeah,
that well, but they are very good creative writers and intelligent in that regard. So yeah,
yeah,
I see what I get that.
yeah. They've written for quite a bit, and they're used to writing under crunch. So, anyways, but they have that as a basic of storytelling is that you want everything to move the story forward because of events prior to it, and it felt a lot more of and then here, where this happened and then this happened. It wasn't there's no correlation in some cases. I'll also admit that the Robin coming back and their explanation that oh no, it wasn't really death, it was just the bus. Like it's literally just the bus to get to what I'm trying to grab the name of it, the Dreamflux Reef. That what we had formerly been calling death is actually he picks up the doorman or the busboy character, Misha. He picks up Misha all the time and takes him into the deeper portion of the flux, and it's the bus. Gallagher uses it all the time. When Sunday got stabbed through him, turns out it was just him hopping onto a train. It deflated, I think, a lot of it, like of the story. It lowered the stakes going into an exposition dump that also felt very choppy. All of a sudden the Nameless are coming back, and we're talking about them, and we're worried about them. Okay, and now sorry, I apologize. I'm on a bit of a soapbox, but I am going to transition into my other issue, which is that I feel like part of the problem with all of this is from 2.1. That we spent so much time setting up Adventurine and dealing with Adventurine's adventure quest that they're rushing through the main storyline instead of what should have been a side story that then leads into what might be coming in the future. Because it could be relevant going forward. It looks like the next patch is going to be circling back to Adventurine and dealing with him. But a lot of that content I feel like could have been a story quest for Adventurine that is a requirement to proceed, rather than a mainline story that seems to have pushed back a lot of what probably should have come earlier. Like,
Yeah, I think there were definitely moments. It's funny you brought the point when we're first going in the Dreamflux Reef, and then we're Gallagher is essentially lore dumping on us.
mhm.
There were moments where I was reading through the text. I'm sitting here going, okay, I'm not following everything exactly here, but maybe it'll be explained down the road. And so it lost to me some of that of the narration of the plot, right? Because I was just like, all right, I'm a little fuzzy on some of these details. They're not necessarily being explained very well or very concisely. And then, like you mentioned, yeah, then we're next thing you know, boom, then we're back on the Astral Express with Boot Hill and Don Hung, and they're talking about something else completely different than what we were just talking about with Gallagher and the Trailblazer. But like I said, it's ultimately when we get to the end climax stuff that to me was made sense, and I was following that, and that's why I was so engrossed in it, and the frustration of the fight. Like I said, it was very frustrating, but the story at that point was so engrossing. I was ready for more. Big thing, and the thing that triggered me to message you and start that dialogue, and then this was the big spoiler to me that just made me like, oh, was the flashbacks with Acheron and her being the emanator of nihility and guiding people towards the nihility. We learn her real name. And for those that are familiar with Hoyoverse games and the universe of games from Hoyoverse, going to Genshin Impact, going to Honkai Impact the Third, when she says her name, that was, and they said it and they highlight it in red too. So it's important when they highlight it in red. And so her name being Raiden Bozenmori May, that I believe is very much a reference to Honkai Impact the Third, because there is I believe a Raiden May in
Mhm.
Honkai Impact the Third, which implies that these are all happening in the same universe.
We actually do have, sorry, just to clarify, we do have
Yeah,
confirmation that it is happening
please
in the
do.
same universe because Welt is a character that walked out of Honkai Impact Third into Honkai Star Rail, which is why when the two of them were talking, Welt is going, "Hey, are you who I think you are?" And she goes, "No, I'm not." really? Because you really remind me of who I think you are. She's like, I don't even remember who I am. You might be thinking of somebody else,
Yeah.
whatever. And then it's like,
So
no, it
so
is.
we get that confirmation, and it's even funnier to me because of all like leading up to her Asheron's release. It was like, man, she just looks like Raiden Shogun. Man, she
Mm-hmm.
just looks like Raiden from Honkai Impact the Third. And so it was that part of it was funny, but that drop when that happened and the scenes that happened prior to it, it was very heavy, very weighted, and I enjoyed every little lore bit that we could get about Acheron and how they told it. And again, part of that too to me is the theme, the color theme, how they tend to black and white everything,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the crimson red flashes. And they even explain her vision of the crimson red and what that means to her. And that just made it even more impactful to me in terms of what that crimson red represents.
No, I think that was honestly a great reveal. She's a great character. I have no complaints about Asherod in this story, to be 100% honest. I have other
Yeah.
complaints. I will get to other complaints, but Asherod
Yeah.
is not one of them.
Really makes me want to pull for her now, but she just happened and I didn't have the economy, so it's fine, but it's fine. She's a wonderful character, fascinating character, and this just made her all the more intriguing to me. And now I think we're gonna transition into the characters, but
Oh, no, 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 no. I do have.
before we do that,
Okay.
yeah, I want to get back to you because I know you said you had other thoughts. You had other thoughts on the story, so I'm gonna offer the soapbox back up to you here,
Okay.
and feel free to step up. And what else you got for us?
So I'm gonna be negative, and then I'm gonna end on a good. I'm gonna end on a good. I don't have a lot. I'm being negative at the moment. I know that, but I do have good things to say. I'm
And
just gonna,
constructive
yeah,
criticism. Constructive criticism. Nobody's perfect. Everybody's looking to improve. We're doing it from a positive way. We want it
yeah.
to be successful. So we're not being negative. It's just constructive criticism,
Constructive
maybe.
criticism. Yeah. I will say that one of the things about the story that kind of rubbed me the wrong way is that once we get into the back half where Sunday takes over as the Sephiroth villain of the story, oh boy, it wants to be saying something really badly and it doesn't really say a whole lot. Or at least as an American who has grown up in a very specific set of like cultural stories, this is not much of a conflict where they're going like, oh, but order versus free will, etc., etc. Look, this is not a new story. Freedom versus peace is one of those things that growing up post 9/11 you saw a lot in media. This is not a compelling conflict or compelling theme of the of this final boss, especially when Sunday is running around quoting a apparently Bible or something, some holy text, and it's just a whole lot of, hey man, you're talking at me, but nothing's really clicking in this one.
Yeah, you quoted some in-game reference, not like
Yeah.
they're really quoting biblical scripture or anything like that. But in-game, just to clarify.
Yeah, yes. It's an in-game, in-universe holy text of some assortment. Story about Inna. And again, the entire conflict of, oh, is it better to live shackled in a dream where everything's orderly, or should you be have freedom and have a choice? And your choice is going to be what wins this.
And they kept referencing
American.
back to the bird and the building of the cage, or
Yeah,
do you leave it alone and let it type stuff, which,
yeah.
yeah.
And that one's a repeating one that I'm just like, look, I don't give a shit about the bird at this point. Feed it to the snakes. I really don't care. Either just crap or get off the pot. Do something. Again, Sunday rubbed me the wrong way, mainly because of the constant repetition of that theme. If he had something to say that wasn't just him repeating that over and over again, I would have been like, oh, okay, that's something. But he really, like, as soon as he drops into villain mode, he just becomes one note as hell. However, good things I do want to say about the story is I actually really do think that they managed to land the ending, all things considered. That I was really concerned, especially at the beginning where they had all these moving parts, that they were just going to fall on the floor and everything was going to spill everywhere and there was going to be nothing to it. But at the very least, they seem to have, at least so far, successfully woven in the Dream Maker, the Nameless, the IPC, all a lot of those early threads that they had in version 2.0 have at least moved forward or met their natural conclusions in the somewhat satisfying way, especially Asheron's storyline. Again, we've talked and gushed about her. Her storyline and her focus really closed out really well. Black Swan, I think her storyline and the remembrance worked really well. Um, the IPC is coming back, so we'll see how that turns out. But again, overall, I think they managed to juggle okay. I keep on looking back to 2.1 and going, I feel like this could have been better paced. But that's all I have for the story. So yeah, characters.
Yeah. So we're getting into characters. So we've touched on a little bit in terms of from a story perspective, right? Obviously, we really liked Asheron. We saw a little bit of Robin. We saw some closure with Black Swan. We were introduced to Boot Hill in person. Jade with the adventuring cutscene at the very end. So, she's going to be playing a part. And we obviously know that through drip marking, she'll be a pullable, playable character. But let's start kind of with where 2.2 did, and that is introducing us to Boot Hill. So
I want to hear your
when
thoughts. I really want to hear your
yeah,
thoughts.
so when we're introduced to him, so I don't know to Hoyo versus credit, and I tend to want to give them the benefit of the doubt on a lot of things. They've earned a lot of goodwill with a lot of the things that they've done in the past. So I always want to approach things in good faith. So I don't know if the character direction was intended to be this way, or if this was a localization thing that is coming through on the English side, but maybe on the Chinese side, or any other voice side, that it's not like this. But the first thing that stood out to me was, man, when he hit with mother freaking, or
Hmm.
that substitute word,
Find me in the
where
Alps.
the intent is to curse, but they don't want to curse. I would imagine here it has to do with game ratings and stuff. But when you meet that person in real life, it's because they don't believe in cursing, so they replace for whatever reason. So they replace it with mother frackin' or something like that,
Hmm.
and it's that substitute that drove me nuts. I just I was instantly turned off to the character in that regard, which stinks because he's a space cowboy, like quite literally. Like my favorite anime is Cowboy Bebop, and so when he showed up and he's space cowboy, and we see some of the things that are going to be as part of, like, when he's a playable character, I'm like, man, that looks really cool. But then when they just hit me with that, I was like, oh god, no, please don't. What have they done? So that really drove me nuts about him, and he did it multiple times. I think like at least every scene he was
Hmm.
involved in, he did it at least once, if not multiple times. So that drives me nuts. Because if you're gonna curse, if if the situation calls for it, but if you're not gonna curse, or in a game that is appealing to the masses, appealing to children, where you can't curse because of that, don't imply that there should be curse words. Don't. If you just said, because I think they've said hell or damn or stuff like that, and colloquially
Yeah.
fit it in to where that makes sense, rather than hit us with whatever other things they did. I keep going back to mother fracking because that's, I
Yeah.
think,
Or
was
fudge
kind of
was
the
one that he used a lot as well.
fludging. Yeah,
Fudging.
what the fludge are we? I'm just like, oh, what are we doing? So I didn't love his portrayal, but again, I don't know if that's a localization thing or if that was a cognitive and conscious decision of the character design team to portray him as that. And again, I'd be interested in the Chinese market. Is it portrayed the same way?
Hmm.
Are there any colloquial sayings over there that are equivalent to mother freaking that are in Chinese? Or does he actually curse in Chinese? Or do they not even come close to something like that? That's what I'd be interested about.
Yeah. Sorry, can I
But
jump in
aside
here
from the
real quick?
character, but what were your thoughts on
Okay.
Boot Hill?
Yeah. To talk specifically about that issue, my guess is that, and this is just based off of what I know of Southeast Asian languages, my guess is that in Chinese, he uses a coarse version of the language in that he doesn't use honorifics, or he uses like specific verbiage that would be associated with a coarse language. And that when the and again, I can't prove this is just a guess on my part. My guess
Sure.
is that when they translated that over, they were trying to do something similar where they wanted it to make it clear that he was using coarse language, but because of ESRB issues, they didn't want him to be swearing like an actual sailor. And their solution was to use substitute words, the fudgin, find me in the Alps, whatever type terms in order to cover up that, but make it clear that that's what he is doing. I feel like a better solution would have been to go the Battlestar Galactica route, where you just make up a swear word like frack. Because in Battlestar Galactica, infamously, whenever they were supposed to say an F bomb, they would just replace it with frack. This way they got around censors, but they could still have the characters quote unquote swear. I think that would have been a better solution instead of what we got, where he comes across as, like you said, the fact that he's very clearly supposed to be swearing, but he's using these kiddie terms makes him sound ridiculous.
Yeah, like
Um,
he's that edge lord in fifth grade. That's oh, I can should I curse type thing. That's,
yeah, or just I don't know. Like I said, I agree. I feel like there was a better way to thread that particular needle, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe in the Chinese version or the Japanese version or so forth, he's like swearing
well,
up
he
a
says
storm, or he's doing
it's
something similar. But
speculation, and that's fair.
yeah,
And if anybody maybe knows or has insight into the Chinese language or how he's portrayed in that section of the game, let us know so we can educate ourselves on that. Because I would be intrigued to know that. So moving on from Boot Hill, let's get into Robin. Obviously, having been a pullable character, and she's in your account now. But from a story perspective, the story did her fine. She was portrayed well, voiced and thought out, and character congruent with her beliefs and everything like that. So I didn't have an issue with her. To me, while she played a role, the story wasn't necessarily about her. It was more the focus was on Sunday, and then the more focus with Asheron in terms of her role and things, and then of course the three old the nameless. So not necessarily her. So my thoughts aren't super extensive on her. Didn't stand out necessarily one way or the other to me, but I will say that the music during the final boss fight with her singing that was cool. It was I think my message to you was this track is a banger, but for a completely different reason than the Cocolia boss theme fight
yeah.
was a banger. But anyway, your thoughts? Maybe you have some more insight on Robin since she's part of your account.
I think the treatment Robin got is one of the downsides of the fact that they were juggling so many characters. And it's that I feel like both her and Sparkle are characters that showed up. You got a tone, you got a vibe for the character, but you never really saw them do anything. You could cut Robin from the story, and Sunday would completely work as a character. You'd only need to do very minor tweaks in order to make Sunday work as he exists in the story right now. And with Robin gone, wouldn't really change much. I know that there's, oh, she died and that's what motivated the search, but considering that was, again, 2.1 and 2.1 didn't go anywhere, you could have easily done a swap with something else. Oh, we got to find the legacy, the Watchmaker's legacy. I feel like Robin is going to be one of those characters, especially with how hard they're pushing her as the musical talent of Honkai Star Rail. Like, they released an album for her.
Mhm.
I feel like she's going to become like Hu Tao, where in the main story, you're left going, okay, whatever. You see her once, you get her vibe, and then during the anniversary and during other events, she's constantly popping up to be that music character. Or Jinyan might be another Genshin pull, where Jinyan's the rocker. So whenever they want to do a musical event, guess who they're pulling out? I feel like Robin's going to slot into that sort of place in the story of the game. Maybe not the meta, but at least from a storytelling point of view, she's going to be the character that they go to whenever they want to do a musical event. And other than that, she's just not. She wasn't really given any time to do anything, and half the time when we see her, she's basically sitting down and shutting up so that Sunday can do something. I don't know. It would have been nice if she had gotten a chance to really stand out, but given the limitations that they had, I understand why she's in the state that she is, story
Yeah.
wise.
And
Um,
then moving on to, I do want to talk a little bit about the Harmony Trailblazer a little bit. So I know I vented that I was frustrated that I was forced to use her in the final boss fight. However, that being said, her aesthetic and like the skill animation cutscene, I love the idea of the jazz swing dance backup singer type stuff. I loved the aesthetic of the kit and how it was portrayed. So those two statements maybe seem diametrically opposed, but they can in fact both be true. In that I hate that I was forced to use her in the party, but I can actually love kind of the look and everything they were going for with her kit. I think they nailed that with the hat and everything, the like,
Mhm.
swing dancing with Clocky in the background. I thought that was great. But what were your initial impressions on the Harmony Trailblazer and what you saw?
I agree. I feel like she's definitely, or he, for those of you in your accounts who use male Trailblazer, but I feel like that the animations and so forth were a real step up, both from physical and Fire Trailblazer. That
Yeah.
Fire Trailblazer's ult is a PNG swiping across the screen, the screen, whereas Harmony or Imaginary Trailblazer gets a full cutscene. They do a little dance number.
You
It
get the five
works.
star treatment on
Yeah,
that cutscene.
it gets a 5-star treatment. It doesn't just it's not a PNG across the screen or the character like swinging a bat around and going, I'm in bat mode. So from that aspect, I enjoy them. I also do think, and I'm somewhat spoiled in that I have watched reviews on this newest version of Trailblazer and how their kit works and so forth. I do think it's interesting that we're probably what we might start seeing is basically new meta teams tied to Trailblazer. Like, for example, break teams are now being really supercharged by Harmony Trailblazer and the super break ability that it has. Especially since it's very consistent, it allows break damage characters to actually deal significant amounts of damage. It's a little bit sad because at the moment it's a very pigeonholed niche, but it gives room for them to grow the game. And I could potentially see in the future other versions of Trailblazer coming out to enable new team types. I'm not sure how I feel about that, especially because you only have one Trailblazer. Making the entirety of break teams hinge on the main character that you might one day need to switch over to another version. I'm less happy with, but at the moment I'm looking at it similar to the way that I'm looking at I looked at Dendro Traveler way back in Sumeru and Genshin, where it's okay, this gives you a taste of this new playstyle, but we're eventually going to release something that either replaces or scales out from there.
Well, and how many gotchas do you see where the main character actually is relevant in a party or a team build?
True.
Like, not many.
Yeah.
They're usually main characters are pretty meh or like suboptimal. They're not even average. They're like under average, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
poor performers. And so to have one that can potentially enable some new teams, and we'll see, like I said, once people get to play with Test and Theorycraft and ourselves as well, maybe some things unfold. So for that to be a possibility is interesting. Other characters, while we still, for me, I just kind of want to touch on, while we didn't see her yet, obviously everybody knows that's listened to the podcast knows I am excited for Jade. So the fact that she will sound like most likely be making an appearance in the next patch, and the IPC plot is unfolding a little bit, I'm excited about that. Her interaction with Aventurine on the phone call and him, oh, is this just a friendly bet? I'll bet what I always bet, my life type thing. I thought that was a nice interaction and good with kind of their relationship
Mm-hmm.
on how they interact with each other. But obviously, I'm excited for Jade and what she's going to bring to the table, how they're going to portray her and her interactions with the Astral Express and the crew, as well as what the IPC is going to bring to this opportunity, as it were, in Pentaconi for them. But were there any other characters for you maybe stood out that maybe I'm forgetting one that we saw or maybe some that we haven't seen but are
Yeah,
being teased?
I am curious. I gave my opinions on Sunday for the most part that how I thought of him as a villain, but I never got your take
Sure.
on
Oh,
him
sure,
as a
sure, sure.
villain.
Yeah, that's fair. So for me, even from a story perspective, it's a very to me, it was a very cliched villain plot point.
Mm-hmm.
It's I want to do good for the people, but to do this good, they're going to lose their free will. But it's for the betterment of society as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course with National Express Trailblazers and everybody's like erring on the side of free will and people will make mistakes and some people will be unhappy, but it's their choice type thing. So that's a very cliched narrative back and forth to what you mentioned earlier about it not really just being very in terms of conflict. In terms of Sunday himself, I thought he was well voice acted, and his direction is in once he we flipped a switch and were the villain. I thought he was acted pretty well, and I did enjoy as you're going through the final parts of the game and you're doing some of the puzzle things that he has you do with the three questions, and then even in those the three puzzles and ultimately the fights and then ultimately his fight while you're going around the theater and he's talking at you, a voiceover, almost as if through the amphitheater sound. I thought that was good. As a character, so I'm interested to see how you if he makes a resurgence or a in the next patch, just because he has to deal with the consequences of his actions, or if he's just going to be now he's like out of sight, out of mind type thing. But as a character, as a villain himself, I wouldn't say that I was as negative as you were on him. Again, just his point of view, his conflict is one that we've seen before in maybe other games, but it doesn't make to me it didn't make him any less intriguing. And then kind of getting his backstory and seeing his history because there was the bird thing with him and Robin. Do you cage it? There was another interaction where he was basically the priest in a confessional and people are confessing their sins to him and he's forgiving him. And just the splash art that was used made it look like he was just very bored with it and just I don't know. And some of the interactions that they shared with you in that were interesting.
I guess real quick, what did you choose for those three questions, if you remember?
Oh, so the three. Well, I remember the first one obviously was the one that we have touched on with the bird. Do you see an injured bird? Do you leave it to its own destiny, its own fate, or do you build a cage, nurse it back to health, and then let it go, even if there's a chance of it not being able to fly and fall crashing to the ground? That was the big story plot there. Yeah, you talk to your crew's like, I would build the cage and nurse it back to health, and I would just I guess my answer to this is kind of practical to what we do in real life, and that's if you see an animal on the side of the road that's hurt, most of us are just gonna leave it alone, and that's because for any number of reasons you don't have the time or the resources to deal with an injured animal. Me, it's almost like a hygienic thing. Like I don't want to touch an animal. I don't know what diseases it's carrying, and I don't want to bring those back into my house and affect those around me type things. That's yeah. So that is the answer to that one. I would just leave it alone. Whatever it is, what it is. The second one was there was
That
I
was the
don't know if it was the
confessional,
second
I
one or the
believe.
third one, but there was one with the father who had sold his children into slavery to
Mm.
hopefully give them a better life than he could afford, and he was being pursued for obviously for legal issues with that, I believe. And it's would you call off the hunt for him so he could ultimately do his goal, which was to earn enough to buy the kids back and purchase them out of slavery, or do you, or is it like he broke the law and therefore he needs to continue to be pursued? For that one, I believe I went with he broke the law, so he needs to. You don't call off the pursuit on that. If he's done wrong, he's done wrong. And this kind of gets into a deeper philosophical discussion because there's whatever tiers of thing where this person steals a loaf of bread, do you pursue them criminally? So they were stealing the loaf of bread because they have two starving kids at home and they couldn't afford the bread, so they stole the bread because they
Yeah, but
wanted
he
to feed the
sold
starving
his kids
kids.
to slavery. He didn't have a
Right.
lot of
I know.
sympathy
I
on
know.
my end.
Yeah. The two.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm just more referencing that is
Mm.
essentially what this is. It's that morality pyramid, and whatever level you want to get to, and that's a philosophical discussion. That is not the aim of this podcast. But so to me, it was he broke the law, sold his kids into slavery. I was like, I think, and it fed into the overarching. It's freedom versus slavery. They're not going to have necessarily a good life. It'll be a poor life, but it'll be a life with family. And I think that's do you value that more than maybe a slightly better life, but you're ultimately a slave. So that's what I picked there, and I can't remember the second one. Maybe you can jar my memory.
Oh, it was his sister, Robin, was going to a
That's right.
planet with a war where a war was
That's right.
brewing.
Yeah, so it's basically the loved one, and then she got shot in the neck
Yeah, and it
while she
was
was there. She
yeah.
lived, obviously, and yeah. So it's do you stop her from going, or do you support her in her mission for this?
Mm,
And so for that one, again, you have to let other people live their life.
yeah.
So to me, it was you support her, you voice your concerns, but at the end of the day, you're not putting a foot down and stopping them from going.
I find it funny that we actually fell in line for slightly different reasons on each one, but yeah,
Oh,
we,
so
we
we have the same answers, but your logic is a little bit different. So where's
slightly.
the logic differ?
So for the first one, my logic was more Sith Lordy, where it's a look, death is a part of nature. The If the bird is going to die, then it's going to feed something else. Let the circle of nature run its course. No
Okay.
reason to necessarily get involved unless you're going to get involved. Yeah, that was mine for that one. For the second one, it was much more that, and I guess this might be Catholic upbringing, but the guy was to a crime, and it's a look. You can go and you can. I will help you go to the police in order to plead guilty and throw yourselves on the arms of the law for that crime, but you sold your kids to slavery and then snuck in illegally in order to try and make it rich here for reasons that are vague, and you don't seem like a very good person. I will help you confess and I'll help you to the best of my ability, but I'm not going to let you avoid the law. Church and state break was
Mhm.
more my thought there. Even though I guess in Pinacone they are church and state together because of the harmony, but that's neither here nor there here. And then for the final one, again,
Getting too deep. Let's bring it
getting too
back.
deep.
Okay, go ahead.
And again, for the final one, I agreed with you that you don't necessarily have to agree with what the person is doing, but stepping in and trying to stop them when they're old enough to make those decisions themselves is not something you have the right to do. You don't have to like it, but yeah,
You can tell the kid, hey, don't touch the stove, and you can tell them why they shouldn't touch the stove. But if they're gonna touch the stove when you're not looking, even though everything you told them, it's okay. Probably a really bad example, but
you get the intention. Just, you can't live
analogies
other
aren't
people's life for them.
analogies aren't 100% one to one. Okay, it's
Yeah.
that's why they're analogies.
Yep. Yep. So, anyways, sorry. Glad that we caught that. We went onto a bit of a pig trail there.
A philosophical discussion. But
Yeah.
to bring it back, any other characters? I think I skipped over Firefly a little bit, but to be fair, to me she was similar to Robin,
Hmm.
except for she doesn't get her own album. And that was the only difference to me, essentially, with Firefly.
Yeah. She just vaguely at the end, it's like, hey, you gotta, and then she just doesn't appear ever again. It's like, wait, wasn't she supposed? Is she just causing fires? Did we just
No,
give her like a Molotov cocktail and tell her to run along? What's going on here?
I think with her story and her sacrifice, ultimately, we're going to learn more about it because obviously we're being hinted at by what the script was and those still frame images with her in Blade in a vehicle of some kind, and then referencing her three deaths. And then again, we talk about the script, and I think his name begins with an E, but I can't remember who the overarching
Elio.
Elio, yeah,
Elio, yeah.
I think that's right. Yeah, so I think that will be more developed as time goes on because I think ultimately that's going to be a major story point in terms of what the script is and his involvement with it, him being Elio, or what I believe his name to be is Elio, but we know who I'm talking about. But in terms of what she meant in 2.2 and her involvement in 2.2, her effectiveness, her activeness wasn't so much on screen so much as behind the scenes. To that effect, got the Robin treatment essentially, again, minus solo track, a fire album, as it were.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts for you, Steve, or anything else you
Well,
wanted to touch on here?
I do have two things I wanted to touch on. One is
Yeah,
character, one is just an event thing that I thought was really cool and really neat. The
sure.
first is Misha. We danced around it, but the spoiler of Misha being the watchmaker
Hmm.
was an odd decision. It's one of those random 4-star characters, actually, maybe should have been a 5-star. Don't know why. Okay. I guess just like Ting Yun, Misha's dead. I We get to pilot around his corpse as a character. It's a bit odd, but
Yeah.
okay. And then the other was I know that we spent a lot of time talking about Boot Hill very early, but I do want to say that his role in the conclusion of Pinacone really made me like the Galactic Rangers. Just the setup of, oh yeah, when we fire off that last shot, like all of them just dogpile whatever it is that killed the person.
Oh yeah, and they don't ask questions. Doesn't matter the cost. They
Yeah,
go to be there.
yeah.
Yeah,
They go there to just destroy whatever's at that. Look, a hero died. We're gonna put down whatever it is that killed that guy.
yeah, that is definitely an interesting organization. I had forgotten that, but in now that you mentioned it, in the moment playing, I was like, man, this I am intrigued to see this group and if we get anybody else out of this group in the future, because that's
Yeah,
what a group of individuals.
yeah. I have my heart out. My heart is set on hopefully a cowboy boot wearing, Daisy Duke wearing, pistol shooting Galaxy Ranger sometime in the future. A
Or
little
an
bit,
Annie get your gun type style of individual. Okay.
a little bit more Daisy Duke, but yeah.
Sure. Oh, so maybe I referenced Cowboy Bebop earlier,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you remember the bounty channel, and there were two
Oh yeah.
cowboys telling the bounties.
Oh yeah.
There was
Not
a
the
black
other one.
gentleman, and then there was the blonde woman,
Yep.
and I don't believe referring to the gentleman.
Nope.
Alrighty.
Not quite that
Well,
extreme, but I wouldn't say
on
no.
on, on that note, so that's going to close up our discussion on 2.2, but we do want to get into some other gotcha news that's going on this week, as well as give you some insight into our plans for next week. So let's jump into that other gotcha news now. Diving outside of the Hoyoverse games and into other gotcha news, a couple things going on this week that caught my attention. One will be the Brown Dust 2 is having their live stream, and by the time we post this video, it will have happened. But it's basically going to be where they announce their collaboration that they've been hinting at for a while. So there'll be probably some developments there, and maybe even some teasers, hints at their upcoming anniversary that's right around the corner. We also had some updates this week in some of the gotcha games that I'm playing. So Eversoul had an update, introduced a new character, Catherine, which Catherine's already in the game, but due to story events, she has another form now, and has thus introduced us to a new character type. Whereas Catherine, the original form, is a human soul, this new one is a radiance soul. So it's a new classification to go along with the typical beasts, undeads, demons, angels, fairy types in that game. So it's just something interesting to check out there. And then, of course, my other top game that I'm playing and always a fan of would be Nikke Goddess of Victory. They have a new event going on right now as well. So the Last Kingdom event just ended, and your chance to get Crown is over. She'll be moved, I believe, to the general pool. Generally, it takes a patch cycle for them to do that, so since she's not a limited character per se. But for the new character, we're introduced and now able to pull for Trony, who is a Burst 3 sniper unit whose manufacturer is Missilus. So if you need a Missilus Burst 3 unit, she fits that marker. A lot of feet enthusiasts really love this character. I'll be honest, feet look really awkward in the character model, both the idle and then the shooting animation, but not for me. Plus, my resources are tapped out from pulling for Crown as best I could. I ended up only getting 2 copies of her from that event, but I'm tapped out and will be holding resources probably until the summer event. We know more about that for Nikke because they usually do summer events pretty big and they usually do a pretty good job. But that's the new Nikke event that's going on right now. The main story for that is revolving around all the gamer Nikke girls. Which there's about 4 of them or so that are involved in the story. Silly lightheartedness there, but the big news that we wanted to share this week is with Wuthering Waves coming up next week. We did want to discuss our plans for that and for you guys, so you guys know. And for that, Steve, I'm going to throw it to you as far as our plans for the launch of Wuthering Waves.
No problem. So the long and the short of it is that our plans for Wuthering Waves are we will be skipping next week's video, that Monday, Memorial Day. Instead, what we will be doing is upon release, Dave and I will do a let's play of roughly the first 3 hours of the game. I might edit it down, obviously, so that it's a little bit less intense of a watch, but we will do a quick let's play of, again, roughly the first 2 to 3 hours of the game. From there, it should be uploaded either the day of or slightly after. To be 100% honest with you, this is recorded on Thursday, the 16th of May, and they are doing a live stream on the 18th, which is before this will come out, but after it has been recorded, at which point we will know more in the exact times that it will hit. Long and the short is that you can expect the video to drop either Wednesday evening or midday Thursday, depending on the exact time when Wuthering Waves will hit in the US. Again, we will be missing next week's video. This will be the replacement of it, but we will be back on schedule after that. Also, after we are done with recording, perhaps while I'm editing, if Dave wants to continue playing, or after I'm done editing, I might jump on as well. We will be streaming in our Discord for anyone who wishes to join us and come in, talk, watch us play. If you want to just chat, whatever, it's a good opportunity to do. Our Discord channel is linked in the description below, so feel free to join us. We will put out a notification when we are getting ready to get that done. Again, there's no set time on that. I do apologize, but it will probably be sometime in the late afternoon, evening, either on Wednesday or Thursday. Again, depending on when Wuthering Waves goes live. So I know that there's a lot of caveats there. We're going to do our best to fill that out. I will also drop information in the description below once we know more, but that is the current plan for next week.
Yeah, so we're like I said, we'll have more clarity on that once Wuthering Waves and Curl Games they do their stream there on the 18th. But yeah, we are looking forward, excited to try out this new format of a Let's Play and put that out there quickly for you guys to watch so we can give our initial impressions. And then we'll also be doing kind of that play along in the session in the afternoon. So yeah, again, if you guys are playing it and want to jump in and stream with us to, so we can all be playing it together, but in our own worlds, right? If you guys want to watch, if you're interested in trying it out or talk with us, get to know us a little bit, or if you just want to come chat, man, we'll be there. Looking forward to it. We do want to thank you guys for joining us for this week's episode. Let us know down below what your thoughts are on the Honkai Star Rail, their story quest for version 2.2. Let us know if you have maybe any predictions for what this means for the future of Star Rail and where the story is going. Any predictions where you think it's going. If you did enjoy the episode, be sure to leave a comment, follow, and subscribe to the channel. You can always email us at brohoyopod@gmail.com with questions or suggestions for the show. We also have the link to the Discord in the description, so be sure to join us there for news, game nights, and content notifications. And then, of course, join us ultimately next week when we dive into Wuthering Waves for our first hands-on impressions. But until then, keep gaming.